I am not a professional developer, but I have been able to generate a SOAP request and interact with a SOAP web service, which is what I had been trying to do for several years. The initial goal for me was to interact with a web service and return the data and display it on a web page. So that's what I've done here. This is what I've done so far. So now I'll show you how I did it. I searched all over YouTube for tutorials on interacting with SOAP APIs and found very few, and even fewer in English. So I'm just making this to help beginners or hobbyists. I'm not a programmer by profession. It's just a hobby of mine. I've wanted to interact with SOAP APIs for many years. That being said, there was a good series that I found on YouTube by this fellow, but he didn't publish the most important part. So he started to build a foundation, but he didn't actually publish the most important part, and that is how we actually generated a request. I was able to eventually figure this out after spending an exorbitant amount of time on it, so that's why I wanted to share, to make your life a little bit easier, hopefully. Okay, so I'm using NodeJS as a server and vanilla JavaScript on my front-end web page. So if we take a look at my web page, my code for my web page, I have some input boxes right here for times, and then I have a table here. So this is the date time picker. If I click here, I get a nice date time picker. So I added that in. Now I have a button, and I added an event listener to the button. So I'm just going to go over this briefly because this is not what I want to spend a lot of time on. I want to show you how to actually generate with the SOAP API call. Okay, so I sent some options to a time endpoint, got back the data, put it in a DOM parser to parse the XML that comes back from the SOAP API, and in my case, I'm querying for all flights and putting them into a table with a for each loop here for the different columns. And that's it. Okay, so let's go over, take a look. This is the server NodeJS code it's going to run. So first, let's look at the time endpoint. That's where this is running. And that's because up here, I'm fetching to time. But notice I'm posting, so just wanted to clarify there. Okay, so over here on the time endpoint, we have an async function where I define a bunch of stuff. I pull in the dates. So I am sending the dates from the input boxes, DT1 and DT2, date 1, date 2, into the server. So I'm pulling that out as DT1, DT2 here. And I console log it just for kicks. And now I have several things I need to do. Okay, so here is the, roughly, I've collapsed a couple of fields because they contain authentication information, which is sensitive. So this is roughly the XML for this particular call, this SOAP action. And so if you have a SOAP endpoint and you don't know, and you've read the WSDL and it's crazy long and you can't figure out which call to make or what your SOAP action is, you can open up SOAP UI or Postman, and in my case I'm using SOAP UI. So you can of course load your endpoint, load all the defaults, etc., etc., and you can click on WSA. You can get the action. So here we see action. So if we look over here, let's just scroll down for a couple of seconds to the SOAP action line. So here, this matches. This is where you can paste that in. Let's go back and look at that once again. So you can copy and paste that here on the SOAP action line. But let's first go back, and I need to do a couple of things. One is I need to replace these dates with the dates that I took from the user input boxes over here. So that's why I have a replace function here, which is going to go into this the raw file. It's going to look for a pattern, and it's going to replace it with the dates pulled from the input boxes. Once that's done, then I need to send this SOAP request. I'm using easy SOAP request. You can actually find that on the npmjs.com site and read about it here. Usage, etc., etc., examples. So I'm using that one. So let's come back to here and continue on. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm sleeping for half a second. I'm awaiting replace word. So I need to replace the word, wait till the dates are replaced, then send this SOAP request to this URL, which was specified in the WSDL file and some other documentation that I have. Sample headers are not really important, but the SOAP action I got from SOAP UI when I imported the endpoint. I'm pulling in the raw XML file that I modified earlier with the replace. Then I'm sending it in the SOAP request, and then getting back the response. I'm writing the response to a file, and then I'm sleeping for a second and a half. Then I'm reading that file, pulling that back in to raw data, and then I'm sending the response back for response 1. So way up here at the top, there should be a response 1. Yes, response 1 here. Oh, response 1 here. Back to the browser. I actually tried the then method because I don't need to actually write this data to a file. I don't actually need this GFL response file, but it's the only way I can currently get it to work. If I've tried putting in a variable, but the variable isn't accessible, but again, you can certainly experiment with that. If you have more knowledge or you're able to do that, that's great. You definitely need to look into promises. I had to spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to figure out promises. I did try that .then, but the .then, it wasn't really working. It wasn't waiting. It would read the response from this file and send back the data before it even sent the request. So even though I was using .then, it wasn't waiting. So that's why I had to introduce these sleeps so that it would wait for the response. So let's run it, and you can see. So we can see here the first one's 26. If I move it back to 28. So it is working. And if you'd like to see what one looks like in the browser after the DOM parser parses it, it looks like this. It's just a standard XML file in the browser. Okay, I hope this has helped you in your pursuit to call a SOAP API and actually do something with the data.